It's there to support you in seeing the truth that's behind the illusion. It's scary and it's overwhelming because so many of the touchstones of identity and definitive safety and clarity and well-being that we used to believe in are falling apart,
Hmm.
but it's not a punishment.
Hmm.
It's not because something bad is happening. It's because we no longer need it. We have outgrown it. We are moving into a chapter in human history that is unlike anything else we've ever experienced.
Hello and welcome to the Soul Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Kat Fowler, and I'm so happy to bring this show back. So I've been recording a bunch of interviews over the last few weeks, and we'll be releasing a new episode every Friday. So after the hiatus, the show is officially back, and I have a series of amazing people that I'll be sharing with you very soon in all sorts of categories from Ayurvedic doctors, energy healers, animal communicators, soul contract practitioners, just like an amazing lineup of people that I am very excited to share with you. So stay tuned for that. We'll be releasing a new episode every Friday. And so for today's show, I have my friend Amar on, and he is someone I've actually followed for a really long time. And um, in particular, I love his energy reports. He has been doing his energy reports on YouTube for probably over a decade, and they're always very comforting to me. Yeah, and when I was doing energy reports at some point, it was always nice to I would hear mine from the records, and then I would also check his, and ours were always very aligned. And so he's an amazing intuitive, and I will read his bio to get started. So, Amar is an energy intuitive, author, and spirit guide. For over 13 years, he's been making the woo woo real. His superpower is taking high level spiritual and mystical concepts and bringing them down to earth. He shows you how to make lasting, positive changes in your life starting now, offering solutions that are grounded, practical, and real. Super accurate bio. And I've done a session with him as well, and I absolutely loved it. So I do want to say I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. I had it somewhat planned out to talk more about intuition and psychic abilities and what's going on in the collective, and then we had some fun with it. So we talk about all sorts of things ascension related, and I hope you enjoy the episode and stick around for the end because there will be a little surprise after the show. Enjoy. All right. Hi, Amar, and welcome to the Soul Awakening podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, Kat. It's so lovely to be back. I think after 6 or 7 years
That
since our
just,
first interview.
it blows my mind. I know. We were
Yeah.
kids, we were babies.
Yeah, really. It was a different time for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, COVID happened, so much happened. And, we were just chatting before, obviously, about some pretty funny situations that we're in now. And I do feel like as intuitives and healers, like our personal life kind of we go through things almost first so we can process and like work through it and then help those in the community that we work with through the same issues, whether it's through our sessions or through our classes or workshops. So I do think it's kind of interesting how we're all going through this right now and the
Yeah.
challenges of like, I think as a sensitive and intuitive person, as you know, you are and I am, with like what's happening collectively, how it's just kind of probably hitting us a little bit harder, or we're just experiencing it, I'd say, to the fullest
Yeah.
on an energetic level as well, and probably in the astral realm as well. And so it's like, a lot going on for us, but I think we're representing a bigger collective of intuitives, healers, sensitives, things like that. So that's why I'm glad to have you on and we can chat all about all of these topics.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So, you're an intuitive, an energy healer, a channel, and you also do tarot as well. And so, for those that are newer, what exactly is an intuitive, and how did you get on this path in the first place?
That's a great question. I think, intuitive to me is someone, I think, first of all, we're all intuitive to a degree.
Hmm.
I just think that some of us came in with maybe those switches turned on or the volume turned up a little bit louder. The
Hmm.
way that I think about it is if you give 100 people a cupcake recipe, and out of 100 batches of cupcakes, some are going to be really amazing, and you're going to be like, oh my God, you should open a bakery. Some of them are going to be like, oh my God, never go into the kitchen again. That's the worst thing I've ever eaten. And
Right.
most of them are going to be in the middle. And I think it's kind of the same way with what we would call an intuitive or spiritual gift. I just came in with some switches turned on and some volume knobs dialed up. But basically, I think intuitive is when you are listening to, paying attention to, the things that you can't see with your physical senses or your eyes, your ears, your five physical senses. And I think it is that sixth sense that allows us to see beyond the physical experience that we're having.
Totally. Before I get into like your journey, your bio, and how you really got there and honed in on those senses, a big question that I think a lot of people have is how do we discern what's our intuition, what's our own higher self or soul guiding us, and the things that we hear or see or the signs that we receive versus outside noise, versus our own anxiety or fears, past life trauma or conditioning? Like, how do we discern this? Yes, I'm listening to my intuition, I'm following the right path, versus something like an outside force, maybe for those especially that are more psychically open, that can kind of tune into all the different frequencies, like we're like radios, so we can tune into the different frequencies. And so how can we discern between really listening to our intuitive voice and knowing that that is what's guiding us versus outside noise or even internal programming or past life things that are coming up?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to think about it. I think one of the ways that we can begin to discern it, because it is a language like any other thing, and it does, especially at first, it can be a little confusing at first, and it does take practice. Just like if you were to start learning another language as an adult, you're going to have to apply yourself. You're going to have to focus, and it's going to
Mhm.
take some time to really get to the point where you can speak French or whatever it is fluently and with comfort. I think a couple of ways that you can begin to discern the difference is the first one that I always do is like close your eyes, close your ears, and if it's still there, that's usually a good indication that it's at least coming from within you. And we can say, okay, this is not external noise or external collective stuff. I think also the way that it feels. Intuition, in my experience, has never been aggressive. It has never been threatening. I
Mhm.
see these channels on YouTube that say, emergency 911, Spirit has a message for you. Spirit doesn't speak in terms of emergency 911.
Right,
It's
right.
always going to be the sense of someone who is caring about you, who has advice like, hey, this might help, or what if you did this, or this might be a good idea, or remember that thing you were thinking about? What about going back to that? So it's going to be suggestive, it's going to be supportive, and it's going to be clear. A sense of urgency, it might be really loud. It might be, a very direct message. Like, let's say you're in the office building at work and the office is on fire and nobody knows yet. The voice might be, Kat, get up from your desk, take your stuff with you, go
Right,
outside the building and cross the street.
right, right,
It's just
right.
very direct, matter of fact. It's never going to be, oh my God, you're going to die if you don't listen to me now. So, spirit seldom has an agenda. If
Hmm.
it's the ego or some old programming or an old voice, it's probably going to be somehow an urgency or like comparative. Like if you don't do this, then you won't get that, right?
Hmm.
It'll be kind of punitive sounding. So I think spirit messages are always going to be benevolent. They're always going to be very clear, very direct. Seldom are there going to be any emotional components to it. It might spark an emotion within you,
Hmm.
right? You might respond emotionally to it, but it's not going to be a threat. It's not going to be doom and gloom. It's not going to be, oh my God, if you don't do this, you're going to die. It's supportive, it's benevolent, and it's just very clear.
And like, what would you say for people that are starting to follow their intuition more? But then let's say it just, because, okay, as you know, we've both been through major spiritual awakenings and it happens over and over and it happens at like deeper and deeper and deeper layers each time. And so when you're going through a spiritual awakening, if for those listeners that are just, it's just happening now, or they've been through one already and now they're going through it third ego death or whatever it may be. And you start listening to your intuition, and then you feel like your whole life starts kind of falling apart. Or, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm totally on a different path. I don't even know if this is for me. Like before my life was like this, and now I'm in a completely different environment and setting and with different people. And am I following the right path? How does someone that's beginning to listen to their own intuition, how do they know and can discern that they're really taking the right advice, you could say, from like their self, their higher self, their soul, even when things around them maybe start to kind of shift in a challenging way.
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that I can guarantee anybody having a spiritual awakening is going to go through is a collapse of some sort.
Hmm.
Something is going to die. An old relationship, old circumstances, old jobs, old patterns, old habits, beliefs of who you are and how you see yourself and your identity. All of that is going to die in some way. Some
Hmm.
of it will be reborn and come back, but a lot of it is just going to go away because the only things that we ever lose are things that don't really belong to us to begin with.
Hmm.
So I think just beginning by understanding that it is going to take some things away before it's going to start giving them back. And intuitive guidance is seldom convenient, especially in the beginning, because it requires you to challenge yourself and your notions of who you are and your circumstances and beliefs and what is possible.
Hmm.
Um, it might not make sense. It
Hmm.
may not be logical. In fact, it's seldom logical because the shortest distance from the 30,000 foot view perspective of the higher self, the shortest distance is not always what makes sense to the mind,
Right.
right? The journey from here to where you are to where you're going to be will seldom make sense to the mind because the mind has been operating from a very, very limited capacity. It's like looking through the keyhole and thinking that you're seeing the whole room. Well, suddenly when the intuition comes in, you're essentially opening the door and now you can see the whole room in its entirety. But the mind, the conscious mind, is still not necessarily going to have access to that.
Hmm.
So I think the beautiful thing is to remember that intuition is in support of your well-being. Now, when that requires you to let go of things that feel comfortable and familiar and maybe create a sense of safety, that might feel scary. But I think one of the differences that we can begin to use is I think of like an amusement park. If you're going to go on like the roller coaster, or you're someone who jumps out of airplanes, or you're doing something that feels like risky and kind of thrilling and scary, you may have the adrenaline pumping and the sweaty palms and the, oh my God, I'm so nervous. But
Hmm.
you're also excited. You're also curious. You're also looking forward to it, and you also want to do it in some level consciously. You're saying, yeah, I want to do this thing.
Hmm.
So I often think that's how intuition can feel is like getting on the roller coaster, and you may have a feeling of, oh my God, I'm so afraid. I can't believe I'm doing this, but you also want to do it.
Hmm.
If it's something that's leading you into danger or it's not for you, it's not actual guidance, there's going to be more of like a hard stop. Like,
Hmm.
no, I just don't want to do that. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel good. Another piece that I would give to people is if you're not sure, give it time. If it's an emergency 911, Spirit is sending you a message to save your life, you're most likely going to receive it in a way that you will not have time to stop and think about it. You'll just go,
Right.
oh, okay, I'm getting up and I'm walking out the door.
Right.
But almost never are we receiving that kind of guidance. That's like maybe one out of 1,000 times. It's something that's like really life or death, so to speak. Most of the time, you can sit with it. So if you're getting what you think is an intuitive hit, you can do a couple of things. Number one, ask for it to be clearer or louder. Say, I think that I'm receiving this, but I'm not entirely sure. So can you turn up the volume or make it clearer to me so that I can be sure?
Hmm.
If you give it a day or two, that message is probably going to continue. If it's something that the mind is just blurting out, it's probably going to be gone in like 10 or 15 minutes. Once you,
Right. Right.
make it through the confusion and the, oh my God, I feel triggered, it's probably going to go away. If it's an
Hmm.
intuitive hit, it's most likely going to continue and it will maybe get a little bit louder and a little bit clearer, but it's going to continue until you finally say, okay, I'm going to do the thing.
Totally. Well, you said some really amazing things there. First off, I love when you were like, what we lose was never really ours, which is so true. And then ultimately, like, nothing's really ours ever. Like, we go back or go back to ashes and leave everything. So it's kind of like a comforting way of looking at things. But also, it's funny when you were talking about the skydiving and the roller coaster, I was like, I feel like that's kind of like our journey to Earth as souls. And some of us were like on the plane, ready to go, and we're like, woohoo. And others are like, no. And the instructor has to like kick you out, you know? Like that's a little bit kind of how it is. And it's just really funny how ultimately we made the choice, otherwise we wouldn't be on the plane. But
Yeah.
it's about facing what we know we're going to face when we get here. So, something that you did say that I thought was interesting is you were saying how the higher self, coming from I think 30,000 feet, right? You said something like that,
Yeah.
looking down at the mind. So I know in different modalities, they kind of teach it like higher self, monad, the whole like higher order of kind of spirit in the body, and then how we're incarnated and then grounded and connected to earth. But could you kind of describe that? Because I think it's harder to find now. And I know like maybe 10, 20 years ago, a lot of books and things like that and teachers talked about that. But what exactly you feel is the higher self? What does it look like? How do we access it? How are we connected to it? And how is that connection rooted to Earth as we're incarnated as physical humans in on this planet?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to unbox it. I think the simplest way that I began to understand it, especially back in 2012 when I finally gave in and said, okay,
Hmm.
uncle, I just thought of it as big self, little self. I just thought of it as
Hmm.
like, okay, there's the little self, which is the human Amar that we see with our physical experience. And then there's the rest of me that you can't necessarily see, but it's something that you might perceive. And it's sort of like those photographs of the iceberg, and we see 20% of it again above the
Hmm.
water, and the other 80% is actually below the surface of the ocean. I think
Hmm.
of that sort of upside down. Like you see
Right.
20% of the self in the physical body, but the body isn't even the physical self. The body is what makes the self physical, if that makes sense. But it's
Hmm.
not who you are. You are not the body. The body is your scuba suit. When you come into an environment that is not your environment of origin, you need to wear an apparatus that allows you to function there. It's like if we went walking on the bottom of the ocean, we would need a suit to help us breathe and manipulate and move through the environment that we're not
Hmm.
native to. It's the same thing. The physical body is your scuba suit. If you're a video game nerd like I am, then it's your avatar, right? It's you change the skin, you change the outfit, you change the whatever, but it's
Hmm.
not really who you are. It's the thing that allows you to navigate a reality that isn't home
Hmm.
while you're there on the planet. So that's how I think of the physical self. Now, that certainly isn't to say that the physical self isn't equally as important, because the way I
Hmm.
see it is the higher self is the one that chose the human experience. The
Right.
higher self is the one that said, okay, I want to be Cat, and I'm going to have this experience, and I'm going to have this body, and these things are going to occur to me. And then at some point, I'll have these peak moments along my journey. And these are the lessons that I'm going to learn. And these are the things that I'm going to do. This is the family I'm going to be born into. These are the circumstances. So it's kind of like an actor picking a role.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know that this is not who you are, but for the duration of the performance, you are going to give it all that you can
Hmm.
and give it all of your energy, all of your love, all of your passion. And so I think of like, the human self is the physical manifestation of the energetic self, which goes up a little bit bigger to the higher self. And I think of it as like a family tree, right? Then that branches off, and we could say, okay, there's a monad or like a soul group or a soul family. And
Hmm.
you may have one consciousness with, let's say, 20 sort of subconsciousnesses, grandchildren and great great grandchildren, that
Hmm.
you're still connected to. It's still a part of that same system, but they're each having their own individual experience, and each of them have, received something from you genetically down the family line, and so it goes. So that I think is one of the easiest ways to think about it is the higher up you go, the more inclusive the definition of self becomes.
Hmm.
So the higher self might say, yeah, I'm Amar in the past, present, future. I'm also him in these other concurrent lifetimes and other potential realities. Then you go up a notch, and let's say it's the monad saying, yeah, I have 10 higher selves, and they all have an individual human self that has multiple incarnations or whatever. So to me, it's still you.
Hmm.
This is, I think, one of the most challenging things to begin to really digest and kind of own, is that yes, the higher self has the higher perspective, but it does not see a separation between itself and its human counterpart. It's like the thumb on the body. I can move my thumb around and it can appear to be independent, but it's still attached to something that has a much greater agenda beyond what the thumb wants. And when the thumb is in pain, the whole system feels it, right? When I'm
Right.
smashing the hammer on my thumb, I
Right,
feel
right.
it. So the higher self is still you. The higher self is just a part of you that kind of knows where the path is heading and understands that, okay, at this moment, at this point, these things are going to start to happen. And I'm going to activate them for Kat because, from her human perspective, she doesn't know this is what's happening,
Hmm.
but it's still you. And then as your awakening expands, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but as you develop and grow from a spiritual energetic perspective, you are able then to connect more deeply with that expanded self. And actually, what we're in the process of right now is the descension of that expanded self into the physical body. So after a while, it's just like I'm channeling right now. I don't need to close my eyes and go into
Hmm.
trance state because no longer is the higher self up there. The higher self is sitting within me and we're, sort of merged. So it becomes less and less of a separate experience. And in the beginning, it often does feel separate, but just think of big self, little self. That's how I
Totally.
started in the beginning.
Totally. I mean, so much of like even ancient Eastern practices and philosophies is really about bringing in and down the higher self, the soul energy, and having that embody your whole energy field, and letting the subtle body with the personality and the false sense of ego and all these things kind of slowly diminish, and let your soul and your higher self really get uh, permeate every part of your energy. And that's, I mean, that's when we find really enlightened beings and things like that. But so we've been kind of keeping it more elementary, but now let's like take it up a notch. And I
Yeah.
love that you were talking about just concurrent lifetimes, because so I do sessions in the Akashic Records, and when I'm working with people, especially a lot of times when people have fears or things that are affecting their life in a really severe way, but there's no logical reason for it in this lifetime, like 95% of the time, it's past life. And so, we'll work with that. And as we're working with healing past lives, and we're simultaneously healing that life, they're also healing this life and the future. Because there is, I mean, within the field of the Akashic Records, there's no time. I know that for readings, because I don't know the person and I won't know if what I'm telling them is something that just occurred, is just about to occur, happened 1 year ago, it's going to happen 5 months from now. They know. And so it's always interesting because I don't have the reference of time. They do, the person I'm reading. But I do think that's something that it can be harder to understand for people, the concept of time, and just the concept of not really having time in the spiritual realm, and how we can have multiple realities happening at the same time, branching from our higher self that are maybe affecting us and our current experience. And so, can you explain how that works according to your view, and maybe in the sessions and the things that you do?
Yeah. Well, I think depending on your perspective, we could call it that quantum view of like the multiverse, right?
Mhm.
That every choice and every decision, even every thought that you have creates a ripple of some sort
Right.
in the fabric of the time of the experience that we're in. And I do believe because we live in a creative, generative universe, everything has an effect. Even if it's just moving my hand across the room, I'm still
Right.
dispersing dust molecules and the air particles and
Right.
whatever. So there's always going to be an outcome. I think that some outcomes are very short-lived and almost instantaneous. Like if I just have a passing thought one time in my life for 2 seconds, it's most likely not going to create a whole other universe. It might just be a little flicker like an echo. But I do believe that, linear time can be really confusing because we've been programmed and indoctrinated to believe that we go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4.
Hmm.
So, what the way I look at it again is I do believe the nature of reality is cyclical. The reality that we live in terms of the real universal truth is cyclical. It's geometric in nature. So it's spirals, it's waves, it's, lines in its form.
Hmm.
And so we have just used the function that we call time to divide up these cycles that naturally occur and make sense of them. So time exists because the human created it.
Hmm.
Time exists because there were cycles already influencing us, and we just wanted to make sense of, like, why does the sun always come around the sky at the same time every single day or
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
So in terms of how we perceive like the Akash or multiple lifetimes or simultaneous lifetimes. And I see that all the time when I'm reading somebody and I'm looking at their field, the left is always the past and the right is always the future potential. And I do see that we are often going back in time, so to speak, to rescue or heal or integrate a part of ourselves that was stuck or abandoned or denied. And then when we bring it into the current moment and bring it into the center, then I think we do heal retroactively. Now we're kind of healing in reverse. And
Hmm.
I really do see it as the center. I believe that every particle is the center of the universe, and an individual is just a collection of particles. So a human or a being that is incarnated is the center of its own reality.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what you have access to, the way to think of it is, how far away from the center is this? Is it something that's way over in the horizon? It still may be connected to me, but it's so inconsequential, it doesn't really matter. But if it's something that happened, maybe it was trauma that happened in multiple lifetimes of the soul's lineage. So there's a really strong imprint that's going to be closer to the center. So it's going to be more influential. I'm going to hear it more clearly. It's going, it's like an odor that if the food is right here, I'm going to smell it really strong. If it's across the room, it might just be a little waft of it. So
Hmm.
I think that we just begin to look at it from the perspective of our center,
Hmm.
because the center always remains. The center exists regardless of time, space, and all of that. And the center is where I always connect to the higher self on up the chain, because that's where the higher self always is. Those expanded aspects are always in the center. They know to leave the center is ridiculous,
Hmm.
right? But humans, because of all the things that we have been programmed to believe and the things that we do and the experience we came here to have in a learning environment such as Earth, we have our center and then we leave our center and then we go, oh my God, why do I feel so horrible? Oh, because I'm out of my center, and I come back to the center, which is the moment. So I hope that that helps to clarify, but I think it's really, think of it more in terms of influence, think of it more in terms of how close is this to me. And I would assert that you, me, anybody else, the thing that we're reading is the proximity to that version of the human self, right? Like the trauma that you might be tapping into through a
Hmm.
healing
Hmm.
session is probably really close to them energetically, so that's why it comes up so strongly. Does that make sense?
It does. It's what's interesting is that what I have found with past life work is a lot of times things will get activated within a person at the same age in this incarnation as it was activated, or they passed, or whatever severe thing might have happened that kind of left an imprint on the soul in the past incarnation. So, yes, I totally get what you're saying with that. And also, I don't know if it's Don Miguel Ruiz, or it's one of these authors, I think it was him, who was essentially saying, like, we're all living our own personal dream. And those who are really powerful dreamers are including a lot of people in their dream. And then when you notice that, then, like, for example, a president, even though he may be very polarizing, like, he's affecting a lot of people. And a lot of people are in his reality, in his sphere, versus maybe somebody that's living a more quiet life, and their quote unquote dream is a little bit less, I don't know if we want to say influential, but because everything is equally as impactful, like the butterfly effect, what you were saying, like the dust molecules in a room, everything has an effect that happens in the tapestry that is the universal tapestry. But it is interesting to think of it as kind of like our own personal reality, and I guess our karma. Do you believe in karma personally?
I believe in karma as a function for this planet and this universe.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily believe that karma is a universal law. I think it's something that can be employed when necessary. But I, more and more, as I dive into this mystery, I really do see karma as a function to ensure that a certain level of learning has occurred or that certain things were checked off a list, so to speak. And so karma, I think, in many ways is like a safety thing to say, no, you're not ready to go on to the next level because you still have things that you need to learn in the intermediate class or whatever. I don't necessarily, because, and the reason I say this is and this maybe is a little bit tangential, but the idea of resurrection that we've been taught, especially through organized and modern religion, this idea that your savior and your glory is waiting for you on the other side, I believe 100% that that is a corruption and a distortion. I believe more in the mystery school idea, and Freddie Silva talks about this in his book, The Lost Art of Resurrection, that the Egyptians were practicing, and many cultures have practiced this, where you actually are going into an induced state of almost like a coma, where they'll take a little bit of a narcotic or some sort of medicine or a plant that will induce sort of like a sleep-like state. You go into this realm for 3 days where you're essentially dead and you're in the spirit realm and you're doing all the stuff that needs to happen for resurrection. And then you come back to the body. Interestingly, the story of Jesus being dead and buried for 3 days and then being resurrected from the tomb,
Hmm.
you're essentially being reborn into the understanding of yourself as an infinite being. And when you do not go through the resurrection while you're still in a body, that is when karma must be employed. Because the trick, I believe, and this is just an inkling, I don't have necessarily hard and fast proof for this, but I believe that it is something that when you come to an awakening of who you are, basically when you die and are still alive, and you and I talked about this, how many times do you have to go through an ego death in a spiritual journey? The answer is yes. There is no number. You're
So
going to
good.
do it as many times as it takes because this is not who I am. Again, this is the
Hmm.
scuba suit. So to come to an awakening and an understanding, basically come into mastery, I think that's what liberates you from karma. I think the ones who use religion for control knew this and actually distorted it on purpose. So there will always be a fresh influx of souls having to come back because they didn't learn the lesson they were supposed to learn. And I think they just kind of hijacked the system, but I digress. So, yeah, and what you said was interesting about, a current presidential candidate or presidential figure having a much broader influence than perhaps some people would like. I do believe that there are souls who come to make an impact on a collective scale.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. I remember years ago, this is when I was still on Facebook, and I think it was after Prince had died. And Prince for me was so influential as a kid. And I really looked up to him just as some weirdo who was just this alien being making this incredible music. And I remember posting about Prince on Facebook on the day he died, and someone had made a comment and said, I don't understand. Today's the anniversary of my grandfather's death. So why is Prince's death more important than my grandfather's death? And I said, well, it's not.
Hmm.
Prince's wasn't more important than your grandfather. It's just the whole world didn't know your grandfather. That's the difference. So
Hmm.
Prince came to have an impact on a global scale. Your grandfather had an impact on a much more local scale. Not one is better than the other. It's just your grandfather as a soul was not here to influence me
Hmm.
because I didn't know him. But that doesn't mean that it's without value. Prince came to have an impact on a global scale. So that's why we mourn his death collectively or celebrate, I guess, depending on which side of the fence you're on.
Right.
But I do believe that there are points on the path that each soul is going to have. But I think there's a lot more flexibility of how we get there in between those key points.
Right. Well, okay. So I really do not know much about Egypt, and I know you brought this up. I know that's big with you, right? Like you feel it. Yeah. Okay. I feel I have a major aversion to it, which is really funny. And I know that's my own past life stuff. I know it. Like I've seen it. I know why, whatever. But I think so. I have some questions for you on that. And I know this wasn't even part of the planned conversation, but I do think it would be really interesting. First off, do you think those beings were higher beings that were not from Earth? Secondly, I know you were talking about like that death process. Are you talking about when they go into like the pyramids or the tombs and they basically bury themselves alive and do these like practices where they're in these rooms with no light or they're just
Yeah.
like one little stream of light at a certain time? Um, because I see the value in that. And I know a lot of cultures do practices like that, but I also feel there was a lot of corruption even within the Egyptian culture. And like, they would do things like soul transfers and things like that weren't necessarily positive, where I do feel like um, the darker groups in our world that currently hold a lot of power have a lot of similar practices that maybe they derive from these cultures and their connection with these, I don't know if they're off world or, whatever we want to say, beings. And a lot of these like secret societies, and I'm not going to like start naming names, but a lot of these occult practices can be derived from some of these cultures. There is value though in so much that they taught. And I know it's funny that you obviously love Prince because he was big in that with his ankh and always wearing his ankh
Yeah.
and whatnot. So I don't think there's any good or bad. I'm not trying to say Egypt was bad or good or
No, of
whatever, but I'm
course.
just curious on like all of your because you have a big connection to it spiritually. So I'm wondering like what are your thoughts on that? Please feel free to go as wild as you'd like with them,
Yeah.
where you think they're from. And it's
Well,
it's yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think what it is that, and again, this is just an intuitive sense that I think that wherever there is power, whether it is human power, energetic power, spiritual power, whatever, magnetic power, whatever, there's always going to be a certain faction of consciousness that wants to see what they can do with that. And I think that in sometimes our zeal to experiment and know more and understand, especially if we want to crack the code, we can think of like splitting the atom, creating nuclear power. That was an incredible accomplishment just on paper but look what it did. Look what it opened up for us in terms of
Mhm,
possibility and potentiality. So I think the closer you get to the core of power and truth, the more volatile or the more potential it has to become chaotic or move into darkness, because I do
mhm,
believe that there's darkness and light in all things.
mhm,
So it's just about which side are you rooting for or are you investing yourself in? So I believe that the blueprint or like the seed of the Egyptian culture was off planet. I
mhm,
also believe that it was basically perhaps giving kids, someone who's spiritually or mentally a child, giving them information that's well above their understanding or well above the training that they have in place to ensure they're using that responsibly.
mhm,
And I think some people just took parts of it and
mhm.
contorted it and distorted it and, abused it basically for their own selfish means and their own ends. So I think it's both. I think that it's a beautiful, powerful, incredible culture. And I think that what we're going to start to see over the next few years is going to be a huge revelation on what those structures really were, on what the roots of that culture really were, and what they were really talking about. And I think we're also going to see where it has been corrupted and distorted and used for selfish gain. So I think it was both. I think it's, again, spirit is neutral, right? The only claim the divine makes is I am. Here is a box of light and shadow. What are you going to do with it? And that's essentially the question we've been asking for the past tens of thousands of years in this cycle of our human history is spirit saying, okay, here's all the toys. What are you going to do with it?
Mhm.
And we've seen some people have done some really horrible, awful, dark things, and some people have done some really amazing, powerful, beautiful things. And now the scales are shifting. And that chapter of darkness, which is also a cycle, if we want to talk about the Kali Yuga and, the way that energy goes in peaks and valleys, we've just been in a valley and now we're turning up in that ascent back to the top. So we're coming out of an age of darkness. So darkness has been predominant because in an environment and a cycle of darkness, it's much easier for it to proliferate.
Just a quick side note. Do you feel like they were Syrian from Orion? Or like where do you feel the connection is with that culture?
It feels like
A lot of
Syrian,
people say Syrian because
Orion,
the head and
yeah,
the yeah.
yeah, and maybe even a little Andromedan.
Mm,
And I think that that's another thing we're going to start to see, because if we're asking, like to bring in the galactic conversation, and then we look at Pleiadians, who I
mhm.
believe are kind of our cousins. I, d- I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think that humans are native to this planet. I don't think
I
that
agree.
humans in our current form are native to this planet. I believe we were a hybrid. I believe that we were created, and again, we were given a box of magic. And then we were left to our own devices to evolve and to grow and develop in whatever way we as a sentient species then decided to. There's always a creator. whether you think it was the old man with the white bird sitting on the throne in the sky from the Bible,
Like
whether
you.
you think, yeah, exactly, whether you think, yeah, exactly, with my background, whether you think it was a goddess or what, whatever you believe was the creator, that is
Mhm.
one thing that I think all cultures agree on. There's some sort of impetus for creation.
Right.
So I think that what we're going to be discovering over the next couple of years and into the decades is where humans have existed within the galactic hierarchy. And I think that's what we're in the process of returning to, is reclaiming our seat at the table, essentially.
That's really interesting that you say that. So yeah, in session work, a lot of times, sometimes people will ask, not always, their origins. A lot of times they'll show me like a big kind of sun, and it's like, well, there was source, and then there was you, and there was a little separation. And then like that's not fun. So they're like, well, what planet? So it's like, 'cause to get so basically it's like, okay, let's see within our universal system matrix that we're in because we're in our solar system, but then that's within our universe, which is within the multiverse. So within our universal system, where were you? And I would say 7 out of 10 people that have asked, it's like a different planetary system, a different star system. And these are images that I've never seen in movies, like things that you almost, maybe you would see in a sci-fi movie, but you almost couldn't imagine on your own. Like you wouldn't make up that you see water and it's silver and glowing and everything is luminescent and, like things like this that you're like, oh, wow, okay, well, this is definitely not on Earth, unless it's inside. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think that is true. Like all of us have different within our DNA encoded different star lineages that will be activated. And I know, like, I used to be a big Star Trek person, but they do say with every planet, the biggest leap forward is when they start to have interplanetary travel. Because then the whole world opens up to them. The whole world, I mean the whole universe. Once you have light speed, and then they had all. I don't remember exactly the episode, but they had all these protocol that Captain Kirk. This is like the '70s one. These are my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that they had to undergo in order to prepare a planet's consciousness for that connection outside of its own sphere. And they would test them, and they would come in as like these incognito agents, and they would see how people would respond to somebody from a completely different planetary system and having different cultures, which are usually a lot more loving. Not all, because like you
Yeah.
said, there is light and dark. And some would fail, and some planets would pass, and then they would be given the divine quote unquote inspiration on how to create craft or ships that can go light speed, and then that's how they open their intergalactic travel. I think that show was channeled. I
Yeah.
think
Totally.
so. Like I do think that's coming. I don't know when that's coming, but when I saw that episode, I remember being like, "Ooh, it's going to be in our lifetime." I feel it's going to be in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I would say the next 3 to 5 years, we're probably going to see like open contact happening on a much broader scale. Now, it may still be something that is kept within a smaller group of people. It may not be on the evening news,
Hmm.
but I do believe that this is going to become more and more prevalent because this is the phase that we are currently in as a planet, as a species, is reclaiming that galactic heritage. And we're starting to see, and it comes in drips, right? It comes in a way that allows the most possible number of humans to accept it and to safely integrate that knowledge and proceed. Interestingly, when you were saying that, when you're reading for somebody and trying to figure out where their planetary origin is or what system of origin, and you're seeing a whole bunch of different places of like, I don't even know if this is in this galaxy. I
Hmm.
think it's because we are in a unique time where we have beings, souls who have come from other solar systems, other galaxies to specifically be on the planet at this time.
Yeah.
Earth Source Spirit was calling for volunteers to say, look, we have a big task ahead of us. And so we need the brightest and the lightest and the wisest to be in a body on the planet at this time. I also think this is just my thing that that's why we see so many animals who are so intelligent and can like talk now. And they seem we're like, you are hearing me. Like, you don't just hear me, you understand me. I think it's because there were really high level souls that were like, I don't care. I'll be a German Shepherd. I just want to be on the planet. So I really do think there's a leveling up
Oh.
of our intelligence just as a group of live beings because we're in this new chapter.
I
We're in
talk
this new
about this
phase.
all the time. Like, I know me and my dog are both from another system. We're from the
Yes.
same spark. And I'm like, it's kind of funny that he's in this body that just really likes peanut butter and like likes to dig around and he can't control it. He's like, okay, I guess I'll be a dog for you. That's fine. Like,
It's true because,
but he's
and
like
I don't
more
know if you
enlightened than I am. Like,
totally, he just looks at you like, what is she doing? Like
yeah,
she already knows
literally.
this. Yeah, I mean, I think the ego sometimes can be our greatest hindrance and also one of the greatest gifts. But, I think if you look at things like the telepathy tapes and what
Mhm.
they're exploring right now with, these nonverbal autistic individuals who previously were relegated to, oh, you're just going to suffer and be, sitting in the corner in a wheelchair. We're seeing now, no, they're telepathic. They've been having conversations with each other for years, and we just haven't even tapped into that level of reality yet. I think we're seeing, and I'll put money on this. Come back at, 2 years from now, and I owe you $50 if this hasn't come true. But I really do think, especially with this Pluto and Aquarius or the Pluto and Aquarius shift that happened at the end of last year, beginning of this year, that is the future coming home to reveal itself. And I think that we are going to see a massive acceleration in discoveries such as, oh my God, nonverbal individuals are not limited. In fact, their scope is far beyond any talking, what we call neurotypical individual. They're tapping into realms of reality most of us haven't even touched yet.
100%. I keep bringing up session work, but I know I've worked with two clients in particular that had autistic children. And I know I mean, from what I've seen, they're very different, but the similarity was like their software was so advanced that it was not fitting properly into the hardware that we're all given. Like we can fit into our hardware because we're functional, but it's like for one of them, I remember I was getting basically the privilege to see what they saw their world like. And imagine you saw a TV screen and you had a split screen four ways of four different dimensions at all
Mm,
times. So it's like they're not seeing different realities. They're tapping into this reality, but they're seeing the interdimensional view of what just we're just seeing with our just plain eyes. And they're
wow.
seeing layers of creation. And because of that, at least for the two of them that I saw, it's just so much neurologically for the system to function and process. It's almost like too much to process, and then that's why it's really hard to get out. And I also have felt the frustration because sometimes in readings I'll be put in almost like a first person seat for some of the things. And then there's such a level of frustration for some of them from being in a physical body like that, even though the soul knew that had to come in this way because it's almost like they're functioning like this is how it feels like vibrating at such a fast level that to slow it down for the people around them and to slow it down and to function in the body the way that it slowly operates according to actually how fast their frequency is really, really challenging and frustrating for a lot of them. And once I saw that, I look at them completely differently after that because like I think outside of I feel a lot of them are so ascended. They're so like beyond they just are there to teach everybody the lesson of love and
Yeah.
giving others the opportunity to work on themselves and offer love. And like it is one of the most intense, I think, callings, especially for the parents and the family members. I mean, it all around, it's a very, very intense blueprint, soul blueprint, like blueprint that we all those families have chosen. But yeah, I think you're right. And it's interesting too, because I know with like Kennedy getting elected, they say it's like it used to be one in 10,000 and now it's one in 36
Yeah.
are autistic. And
Yeah.
I do wonder, I mean, outside of the chemicals and all those things that can create this issue,
Yeah.
um, like you were saying, like how much of that is actually because these souls are from like a different just level and then they're like, okay, this is how we're going to accelerate the spiritual growth within this family right
Yeah.
now and the
Totally.
consciousness of the people around me.
And I do think it is evolving the species. I think
Hmm.
that we
Hmm.
are, we've been talking about this for, I've been talking about this for at least a decade. Information on the divine human 2.0, Homo Luminous started to come in from my guides around 2016. I think I have a video on my YouTube channel about it, where we are in, and my guides told me this in the beginning. Part of what humanity is going through right now is the ascension process is happening while you're in the body this time. So you're essentially riding a bicycle and deciding to rebuild it into a sports car while riding the bicycle. So
Mm,
that's what all these ascension symptoms mean. That's what all these weird things that are happening en masse. Like it's not just one person having ringing in their ear. It's hundreds of thousands of millions of people going, "What is that?" And it's not tinnitus. It's something completely different. So I think we're starting to see this old reality challenged. And, if you look at the telepathy tapes, like can't remember the name of it, but the association that basically deals with speech and communication, like they're saying that, this way that these nonverbal individuals spell by pointing at numbers isn't a valid form of communication. It's the same thing that they said about Braille. When Braille was introduced, they said, no, that's not a valid way to communicate. And so when you challenge the old guard, when you
mhm,
challenge the established system, of course, they're going to do everything they can to defend their position. But what they're also doing is relegating themselves to the bin of irrelevancy. They don't see that at the time, but this change is happening, period. It doesn't need to be sanctioned. It doesn't need to be approved of. In fact,
mhm,
it can't be controlled. It can't be stopped. So whether or not all the chemicals that were being injected into the bodies of these young kids was by design to hold them back, or whether we just didn't know and
mhm,
thought we were doing something good for them.
mhm,
Spirit has found a way to say, do whatever you want. I can hijack your system like that. Like, do you really think I, that created all of this, can't find a loophole in what you're trying to do? So, whether it is these really high level beings coming into the outdated or sort of old fashioned human form and forcing it to upgrade, or whether these things happened as a result and then the resiliency of the spirit found a way to work with it, I
mhm.
ultimately
Or
don't know.
both. Right.
I think it's both, probably. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
It's the evolution of the species.
Mhm,
I really do think that in the next, I'd say 10 years from now, we are going to look back on so many things that we just assumed were a part of the human experience and the earthly experience as something that's as quaint as the covered wagon now. Like, I think we're going to look back and go, oh my God, isn't that cute that we used to think that? Oh, that's so adorable that we used to believe these things were true about being a human. Because the special experiences, or I would say the exceptional experiences of like the telepathy tapes or someone having a gift of clairvoyance or whatever, yeah, those things are exciting to look at and they're activating for a lot of people. But I also think what they are showing is this is what's possible within a human body. Everybody is going to be able to do their version of this at some point. And those of us who have these switches flipped on, we just came to live as an example,
mhm.
to just say, yeah, it's possible. And I'm also human figuring it out for myself in real time, right? So it's it's what I've been saying is like making mysticism real again, like
Mhm.
normalizing the mystical, normalizing the ideas of ascension and the new earth. These are not pie in the sky dreams. They're happening right now. It's
Totally.
available right now.
Totally. Um, we talked a little bit about light and dark, and with everything that you're saying, with the world that we're in right now, and it just everything looks really intense. Like it's April Fool's Day today that we're recording. And I'm not going on Instagram because everything that I see that is April Fool's could be real because that's the reality that we're in. Literally, it's like I saw something that was like France is going to trade the Eiffel Tower for the Statue of Liberty. And I was like, possible? Like,
That's
literally,
totally within the realm
yeah,
of
like
possibility.
could happen with everything politically and everything going on. Like,
Yeah.
could happen. So, like, I was just like, I'm not going to go on Instagram today because, the reality that we're living in is so chaotic, like, as a collective, with so much being unearthed every day that it's almost hard to discern, like, is this real? Like, is this really happening today? Like, every day, something like that is going on with our collective. So, as an energy worker and an intuitive, knowing that, or I'm curious what your feeling and definition of the highest power, the creator of God is. Is God all love? Is God all light? And then why did he create this darkness? Why are we in such a collective state of intense chaos right now? And I know you were talking about Kali Yuga and how we're kind of coming up out of that and the difficulty and the darkness. But it just seems like extra challenging right now. So why, I guess like this is a very old, age-old question, but why would a loving God, if that's your, belief of God, and I'm curious, allow such negative, dark, heavy, and basically evil things to occur whether it is for our spiritual growth or not. Like, why is that a necessary thing right now? And how can we, as people going through it and everyone listening, work through some of that heaviness?
Yeah. That's such a powerful question. And I think there's a lot of ways to come at it, but the way that I see it is spirit, source, God, whatever you call that intelligence, is all things. So, in order for source to be all things must be allowed to occur because nature does not create from exclusion. It always creates from the totality of creation. It doesn't say, okay, only sunshine for those people, but everyone else just has to stay in the shadow. No, the sun just shines. It's
Right.
available. Maybe there's a cloud in front of it. Maybe it's nighttime where you are, but it's still there and it's still shining. So I think the first thing is that in order for all things to be, source must allow all things. Otherwise, it ceases to be source.
Hmm.
The reason I believe that God allows all the horrible things to happen is the same reason that God allows all the beautiful things to happen, because it is the totality of all things. I believe that spirit uses the shadow to show us where she is.
Mm.
If I did not have the contrast of a shadow, it would just be a blank white wall or an endless void of darkness. Neither one of those is sustainable in and of itself if I am experiencing myself in the world. I need to have the bitter and the sweet to even know what it is. If everything was sweet all of the time, I wouldn't know what sweetness was.
Right, right.
So I need the nasty, bitter, dark stuff to go, oh God, I don't want that again. Now I understand and I have context.
Sorry, that was that little time.
Oh no, that's totally fine.
Okay.
I didn't even hear it actually.
Okay.
Um, so I think that just to begin to see things from that perspective, and I understand that that can be overwhelming for a lot of people, but what I think it actually does is it opens you up to an immense amount of creative power. We were given free will so that we could choose.
Mhm.
Am I going down the path of light or am I going down the path of shadow? And all of us as souls have done both in different lifetimes. I remember a couple years ago, I was having a lot of soul recall and a lot of soul remembrance, like the veil was just dropping. I
Mhm.
saw some really freaky, scary, dark stuff that
Mhm.
my soul had been a part of that was really hard. It kind of floored me for like a couple weeks where I was just like, what the heck have I
Mhm.
just witnessed?
Mhm.
And to see that it is all occurring within the entirety of this experience of free will that we have. Spirit has said, I am giving you a body, a soul, a lifetime, a soul path, an arc, a team of helpers, whatever. You have everything you need. And it's really about us remembering that the absolute authority we're looking for already resides within us. And I think that the reason that the darkness is allowed to exist is it helps make sense of the light. The light helps make sense of the dark. And once you understand that you are all of that, that is when you can choose to begin to transcend it, because I think that when we externalize our darkness and don't deal with our shadow, then we see it as figures of evil on the world stage. And so it becomes something that I can judge and I can condemn and I can try to remove myself from. The minute that I actually accept my darkness and my shadow, now it becomes something that exists within me. So I don't need an external reflection of it. That's the irony. It's why when people also disassociate from their light, they are annoyed by all these love and lighters and have a happy day and, find your vibe and whatever. Like it's because you've externalized your lightness. You have not accepted the part of you that is that. Here's
Mhm.
another thing. Chaos, from just a physics perspective, chaos is always a sign of one thing, that a tremendous amount of energy has been unleashed.
Mhm.
When something breaks down, to go back to that example of the atom, when we split the atom and broke one of the fundamental structures of physical reality in two, it unleashed a tremendous amount of energy. That is, from my perspective, when our off planet friends started paying attention, because it
Mhm.
sends out a signal that, oh, the humans have discovered nuclear fission. So, what happens when something breaks, it releases a tremendous amount of energy, and energy always arrives wrapped in chaos of some sort.
Mhm.
Always.
Mhm.
Even harvesting your veggies, for you, yummy, salad time. For the veggie, it's death.
Right.
It's chaos. It's the end of life. So it's always going to depend on which side of the fence
Hmm.
you're on. But when we see chaos, it's because a tremendous amount of energy is being released because something is broken, something has collapsed. And one thing I think all humans can agree on is things have not been great. I don't think any human would say, yeah, I wanted to, even, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, we were just switching sides every 4 years. Do you want to get shot in the foot or the hand? Like every 4 years, I just get to choose the worst, the lesser of two evils.
Right, right.
So I think that what we have done collectively, especially around lockdown, when Mother Nature kind of put us in timeout, she was like, all right, y'all aren't listening. You're not paying attention. You're not getting the message. This is what my guide said in the beginning. You are in the midst of a global awakening, and some of you just need a really loud alarm. So
Mm,
until people start to wake up and reclaim the reason that a system fails is so it can show you where you have given your power away.
yes.
The reason that you become disillusioned with the guru or the icon that you are worshiping is that is by design so that you can see that it never was in charge of you.
Mm,
It never really had the best interests at heart. How could it? One person can't know what 200 million people need, aside from food, clothing, shelter, water,
hmm,
whatever.
hmm, hmm.
So, all of this is to say, yes, it's intense. Yes, it's chaotic because the old world is collapsed and a tremendous amount of energy is now up for grabs. So, what are you going to do with it? You've just been given a box of magic, and Spirit is saying, what are you going to make? It's up to you. And that's what is so terrifying for so many people is that
Mm,
there is no absolute right and wrong. There's choice and there's outcome. There's the light and the shadow and all points in between. And you get to decide where you're going to hang out. It's entirely up to you. And that's what free will means. Free will means we are free to decide. One more thing that I'll add. I believe in a benevolent reality. I don't believe in a punitive universe, but I believe that it's more neutral. I think
mm,
unconditional love is neutral. It's just unconditional. I love you, period. There's no condition on it. I also believe that energy is neutral.
mm.
The electromagnetic field that we exist in, and I think even probably physics would support this, energy just is. Whether it's a positive or a negative charge is up to what you infuse into that field of energy. So I believe that the field that we live in is unconditional. Spirit is saying, I love you so much, I will allow you to create a reality of suffering and struggle and denial if that's what it takes for you to wake up and remember, oh, I'm the one who did this.
Right. Wow. Well, that was a lot. There was a lot of things covered. That was really good. It's interesting because you remind me a lot of my mentor. I had a mentor for 5 years. He recently passed last month. And what's interesting is you guys even kind of look alike, which is like so funny to me. But he was complete, like just a badass. I don't know how else to describe him. He was a psychic medium, one of the best, I think, in the world. And just level of accuracy, insane. And his one of his main teachings to me as someone who works with people energetically and things like that was exactly that. Like it's all just energy. It's all just energy, whether it's a light figure, a shadow figure, like it's just energy. And I think there's something about so you do sessions with people and I know you feel that way and that's why you're saying this. So, but how do you not, even though you know it's all energy, and let's just say something you're working with someone, you see something really dark or you're coming up against some really heavy stuff. How do you release the fear around that? You know, knowing that, I mean, because logically we can say it's all energy, this and that. It's basically yin yang, it's equal. But then there is like an emotional and energetic major difference between these different energetic figures.
100%.
And how can you, for the listeners in particular, how do you protect yourself and shield yourself? And like, what are some good techniques to keep yourself grounded and shielded in a time like this where a lot of people are going through a lot of heavy stuff? And so if you just go out in public and run some errands, you're going to bump into a lot of really heavy energies because not a lot of people are really on this super conscious level just yet.
Totally. Well, I think the first thing to lead with, and in my own practice and in with my clients and my own practice with myself, with family and loved ones, you just meet people where they are.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? If someone comes to me and has just lost a family member or a loved one, my response is not going to be, oh, well, it's all just energy. They exist somewhere, love and
Right.
light. No,
Right.
I'm
Right.
going to
Right.
meet them with, oh my God, a loss is real. The
Mm-hmm.
human experience of loss and grief and death is very real, and suffering and fear and struggle are very real to the human experience. So we must include the human always.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to learn what within your human experience is something that you should pay attention to and acknowledge, and something that's just noise, right? You're like, oh, I've heard that voice a million times. I've been hearing that
Mm-hmm.
negative self-talk my whole life, and I've just learned at this point that I just ignore it. Only you ultimately can know what you need and what within you is an actual need that you need to tend to, and what is something that you can just go, oh, that's just mud on the mirror. I'm just going to clean
Mm-hmm.
it off. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that we meet the shadow and the darkness that we experience externally is by meeting it within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds trite, but it is true that anything that triggers you or activates you into any emotional state is representative of something that is active within you in some way on some level. Even if it's just the very simple, I see a dark figure out there and it triggers me because it reminds me of the darkness that I hold within myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I feel triggered by that, then that's an opportunity for me to hold my own little shadow monster closer and say, honey, I see you. You're allowed to exist. You're not the one in charge. You're
Mm-hmm.
not the one who's driving the bus or holding the microphone, but you're there. And I know that you are. And that's fine. You're allowed to exist. So I think, that's one way to look at it. And another way to look at it is we're all just players on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest challenge to acknowledge is that every being that I can see as a separate human is in some way living out the path and the course that their divinity chose for them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is really, really dark and scary, and some of it is really, really bright and beautiful, but it's all existing within the field. So I think ultimately you just get to the point where you realize I get to choose. There's what my dad is watching TV in the living room. There's 400 something channels on right now. There's a lot of stuff on there that would be really disturbing and really hard to watch and really uncomfortable.
Right.
I just don't have to watch those channels. It's not that I am not aware of it existing. And if
Mm-hmm.
I confront it in my physical day to day walking down the street, I'm going to stop and give it the compassion and kindness that I'm capable of. But I'm also not waking up every morning and like, okay, what's on the doom and gloom channel?
Right.
Because my focus
Right.
is elsewhere. I am focused on building the new thing.
Right.
So for me, that's where I must focus. Some people are here to put out the fires in the old world. So if every day you're heeding the call and putting out the fires, go for it. Do it with gusto. That's why you came. And we need all of those people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like some souls are going to impact 8 billion lives and some souls are going to impact 10 lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's still meaningful. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that the answer to the darkness and the shadow is to meet it where it is, meet it where you can, and not pretend it doesn't exist and not try to pray it away. See it as an opportunity to find something deeper within yourself that allows you now to say, well, I could sit and judge that, or I can acknowledge that I've had those thoughts too.
I love that because that takes a lot of the fear away from these experiences. And also, it really puts the power back in your hands. So I'm curious, knowing this philosophy, do you believe in shielding and things like that? Like energetic shielding?
Yeah, I believe that it is useful up to a point,
Hmm.
especially in the beginning.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
I think ultimately, once you realize that the light resides within you always, and the more you cultivate and the more you connect with that, and the more that becomes your default setting, then you become like a bug zapper. And yes, there are times when I will consciously clean my energy. There are times when I feel like, ooh, I got something funky going on, and I will take the time to go through my visualizations and do what I do. I also have, when I begin a session with a client, when I end a session with a client, I have very clear things that I let my guides know, like, okay, we're done. The circle is closed, the
Hmm.
session is over. But more often than not, these days, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I just walk around as a source of light. And
Right.
if something nasty and, creepy crawly can get close enough to me, well, then you may have a message for me. But you're the one seeking me out. I'm not afraid of you. I didn't call you in. You arrived. So there's a reason. So I'm going to be curious about that. And I find 99% of the time when I sense something kind of funky in my environment or in my field,
Hmm.
all I have to do is turn towards it. Just shine my light
Totally.
100% on it and say, what can I do for you? 99% of the time it's going to go, I can't. That's like staring at the sun during an eclipse. I can't do that. So it goes away.
Yes, or it's a big shadow of a very tiny thing. It's like a little illusion. You're like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what exactly do you do for your sessions? For those that are interested, because you have so much wisdom, and I think also you can really calm people down.
Yeah.
What I love about your videos, is, and this is why we've stayed in touch, is because so many times you put something out, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going through the exact same thing. I can't believe you said that. You put it into words, and this is
Yeah.
exactly what I'm feeling. Thank you for sharing that, because then you don't feel so alone, you know? And
Yeah.
you're really, really, really good at doing that. So that's on your YouTube channel. But for session work, if people listening, they want to work with you, what exactly do you offer and what's that like?
Yeah, well, what I say to people is I make the woo-woo real. My
Hmm.
whole intention from the beginning has been to get to people to the point where they don't need me. And whether that is one session or 1,000 sessions, that's not up to me. I don't decide. I'm here to support and help people as often as I can. So sessions with me, it's basically, I begin each session with kind of reading the field and offering a channeled message from their higher self or their guides or whoever it is that shows up for them that day. I like to start the session that way before I have heard anything from them because it's a nice cold reading. It allows me to share uninfluenced or unbiased by what they might tell me. It also gives them a perspective to see from that highest perspective, like what really is the perspective of the higher self or the guide.
Hmm.
And then we just let the conversation flow from there. I just have this ability to hone in on anything that isn't true. And whether it's an old truth that you just haven't bothered to take apart and dismantle, whether it's some sort of external programming or familial stuff, I just have this uncanny ability to take really, really high level stuff or invisible stuff and make it accessible and easy for people to see. I offer practical tools to anybody so they can start making changes in their life today. It's really just about reclaiming yourself as the center of your experience. And the minute that you do that, everything comes into a new perspective because you see, oh, I may not like it, it may not be enjoyable, but this is being brought to me by some level of myself as an opportunity for liberation, for growth, and for understanding. Because I do believe that everything that we experience is a choice on some level.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's the human choice of chocolate or vanilla. Sometimes it's the higher self saying, okay, it's time for Kat to have her spiritual awakening. She's going to have no idea what's happening.
Right.
We're going to push her into the pool. It's still you. It's just you at the higher level. So I help people make sense of all of that. And with
Hmm.
my ability to see on multiple levels simultaneously, I can oftentimes give you the why.
Hmm.
And the why is oftentimes what allows you to sort of crack the code and get the lesson so that you can begin to move on. So I just take the spiritual stuff and make it real.
Love that. And you wrote a book as well.
Yes, I
Yes,
did.
Notes to from the Higher Self.
Yes, Notes from the Higher Self, available on Amazon. This was a preview test copy, so it doesn't come with the gray band on,
Right,
but yeah,
right.
available on Amazon by me, Amar. This was about 5 or 6 years of channeled messages that at the time I didn't really understand what they really were. I just thought, oh, this is something for my followers, something to share on Facebook. Interestingly, it was always, like you said, like it was one of those things where I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed to hear right now. I
Hmm.
didn't realize at the time it was just my higher self telling me what I needed to hear. And
Hmm.
I just thought, oh, this is content for my Facebook page. And it's useful content. But basically, it's, 6 or 7 years of channeled messages that are really nice little bite-sized chapters, bite-sized lessons. I hear people often use it as an oracle, right? Like you hold the book, ask your question or ask for guidance, flip to a page. You'll see they each have, like each
Love
chapter,
that.
a little post-it with the message and then
It's
an
just like
explanation.
what we were talking about, the whole.
Exactly. Exactly.
How
So that's
funny.
available on Amazon.
Awesome. Awesome. So, is there any last message or anything that you'd like to share with anyone listening today that you feel is important? Any advice, any tips, any last final message you'd like to offer to those listening?
I think that where we are right now as a species is we are moving into a phase where everything that we have relied on to tell us what is true about this human world that we have created, that is going to start to fail us.
Mm.
We're already seeing this. Things that we've been told are true or for our best interest or for our good, we're seeing they weren't actually ever good for us.
Mhm.
Things that we've been taught, this is fact, this is science, this is proof, this is evidence. We're going to start seeing that that was either entirely false or there's much more depth to it than we were allowed to perceive. So I think if I could leave this with anybody is get really, really curious about what is happening behind the scenes. Like tap into that feeling in your gut, that feeling in your shoulders, that sense that like I don't know if this is really true or I don't know if this is really real. It's there to support you in seeing the truth that's behind the illusion. It's scary and it's overwhelming because so many of the touchstones of identity and definitive safety and clarity and well-being that we used to believe in are falling apart,
Mhm.
but it's not a punishment.
Mhm.
It's not because something bad is happening. It's because we no longer need it. We have outgrown it. We are moving into a chapter in human history that is unlike anything else we've ever experienced. So tend to yourself, tend to your loved ones, be kind, be compassionate, but also come back to the edge of your comfort zone and be curious and be willing. Be curious. All you have to do to be successful in life, especially a spiritual journey, is be curious and willing. That's it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to understand it. Show up and say, God, I'm angry, I'm hungry, and I'm confused, but I'm here.
Mm.
That's honest and that's real. Spirit doesn't want you to slap on a fake smile and pretend that it's okay when it's not. You
Mhm.
can be angry and spiritual. You can be
Yes.
frustrated and lost and spiritual. It's all happening within that field. So be real about where you are because people need authenticity more than ever.
Totally,
And
totally.
don't
As a
don't
very
shy
fiery
away.
person myself, I agree because I feel like so many people are like, oh, you can't be angry, this and that. It's like it serves a purpose and you
Yeah.
need your boundaries. So like,
Absolutely. You have to
yes,
find your edges. That's how you find the center, right? We were talking about the center.
exactly,
Go to the
exactly.
edge of your light, go to the edge of your darkness, and then come back to the middle to see where you reside because that's what's real. If you close your eyes and if you close your ears and it's still there, chances are it's real.
Totally. And I don't want to forget, but you do have a school that you are starting, right?
Yes. Awakening School. We're recording this on April 1st. The first round of Awakening School is starting this Sunday, April 6th. I'm not sure if this will be out by then.
Mhm.
But it's a 13-week program that I have created. This is the initial offering. I'm super excited about this. This is basically 13 years of my journey distilled down into 13 weeks. When I woke up and had no idea what was going on, and all I could find was people talking about the 12th dimensional crystalline matrix, which I'm like, what even is that? I don't understand. Like, I
Yeah,
just need to know how to make it through my day. Can I
right.
please have some practical support?
Literally.
So that's what I did. I found ways to make it practical and real. And that's what Awakening School is 13 weeks of me giving you the tried and tested methods and tools to help put yourself back in the driver's seat of not just your spiritual experience, but your life. Your
Love
life.
it.
So people can
Love
find
it.
that on my website, amar.energy, if they want to know more.
Awesome. So yeah, I was just going to ask you about your website, but they can find you at Marta Energy and you have your YouTube and then also I
YouTube
think
and Instagram are Amar Energy, and TikTok is Amar.energy. But if
awesome.
you
Yeah.
just type in
Yeah.
Amar Energy, you'll find me somewhere.
And I'll put all of that in the show notes. But thank you so
Awesome.
much. I love talking with you. I just think you have so much wisdom and a lot of practical experience. You're not just one of those like study, 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 like you've lived it. And I think that it really comes through with everything that you share. And so I appreciate all of the information you shared today and how relevant and lighthearted you make it, these heavier topics for everyone
Yeah.
listening. So thank you for coming on the show again.
I had a blast, Kat. Thank you so much. It was lovely to see you again, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Love to. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed the show and this conversation as much as I did. And we'll actually be doing another interview together, but this time Amar will be interviewing me for his YouTube channel. And so you can find that by subscribing to his YouTube online. And that all of that information is in the show notes. And also, I'd like to offer a gift for my beautiful soul family listening. And so, for those of you interested in doing an Akashic Records reading with me, you can receive 10% off your first reading with the code SOULPOD, SOULPOD. So you get 10% off with the code SOULPOD, and you can find all the information at catfowler.com. And then you just go to the Akashic Records Readings tab. All of the info is there and the information to book. And then at checkout, you just enter that code SOULPOD, and it's for 10% off your very first reading. So, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Soul Awakening podcast. When you subscribe, you'll be notified of our new interviews and episodes that release once a week every Friday. You can find all the episodes online on catfowler.com, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and pretty much all places where podcasts are found. And now, finally, I'm also offering the episodes and the interviews online on YouTube. So you can find them on youtube.com/cat_Fowler. And again, that'll be in the show notes, but youtube.com/cat_Fowler. And finally, you can watch them on video. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I finally got to getting there. So here we are. So, um, and while you're listening to the show, wherever you are, Spotify, YouTube, please leave a review and a comment while you're there. It really helps the show. If you love the information that you heard today and it sparked something in you, feel free to share it with your friends and family as well. So I'm your host, Kat Fowler, and thank you so much again for listening. I'm wishing you lots of peace, love, joy, happiness, and success for the rest of your week, and smooth sailing for the next few weeks to come. So I will see you on the next episode.